Okay, good evening everybody. Thank you very much for coming. I organised this event today because I'm very concerned about the rollout of 5G technology. Now, my name is John Kitson. I'm running as an independent candidate for the upcoming election to hopefully become MP in the Totnes constituency. And part of my plan is that I will keep 5G out of Totnes. I believe that health is fundamental, and also I will give back my entire salary if I get elected to environmental groups in the constituency. And I want people to write into the Totnes Times, their local paper, and ask, basically announce which cause, which charity, which environmental cause you would like me to support. And I will then publish in the paper each month which environmental cause I will be supporting. I think 5G will affect so many different things, but I'm really standing for the environment and for the health of our community. And this is why I set up my website 5gawareness.com and my YouTube 5G Awareness. I have a few thousand people following the news on my YouTube channel. And I'm here fundamentally because I care. I care about all living things, not just people, the environment, plants, insects, and animals. And I think we need to really create a more healthier world. And we need to learn about what this technology is doing to us. So I thank you all for coming tonight. And yeah, give yourselves a round of applause for coming tonight. So I'd just like to mention very importantly, we've got 2 emergency exits here, so at the front and at the back, just in case of fire. And we've also got the toilets downstairs, so that's at the back, to the exit that I'm pointing towards at the back left. We will have an interval after about 1 hour, and then you can go for a toilet break, 10-minute interval. You can also look at some of the information that we've got on the back table. There's also a donations blue bucket there on the back table. This is a free event, but we really appreciate any donations that anybody can offer just to cover the expenses of hiring a hall and the other costs involved with tonight's event, so that would really be appreciated. We've also got some stickers at the back as well to raise awareness about 5G and some other information. So, yeah, we're going to also circulate a list so that people can write down their contact information if they want to stay updated about 5G and stay in touch, because we really want to create a local meetup group that meets regularly to discuss how to move forward regarding this topic. Yeah, I'll be circulating those after the talk commences. So we're very fortunate to have Barry Trower here today, who's come over to discuss 5G. And yeah, we're very lucky to have him. I met Barry a year ago, as has Jason Iosatos, who's joining us today, who did an interview with him. And I'd like you to give a big round of applause for Barry Trower.
I'd just like to say, please, that I work for free, and any money you put in the bucket doesn't come my way. It goes towards the cost of life. And I'll just explain myself very, very briefly for those who don't know me. I started studying microwaves in 1959 for the military. I'm military trained in microwave warfare. My first degree, I specialised in nuclear and atomic physics, and I concentrated, my dissertation was on absorption of the far end of one of the microwave bands. On my second degree, I studied thinking processes, environmental influences on thinking processes, including how microwaves affect the brain. I also have a teaching diploma in human physiology, I'm actually a local boy. I live just down the road from here. I see you as neighbours. I used to live down the road at Dartington for many, many years, and I taught in Torquay, and I taught A-level physics and maths and some physiology just at Ashburton. During the Cold War, I spent 11 years talking to captured spies who were trained in microwave warfare, when microwave was then, as it is now, being used to cause harm. I'm the author of the confidential report on Tetra airwave for the Police Federation of England and Wales. I also wrote the higher confidential report for the senior officers. And since I did that, nobody has left me alone. I travel the world, I talk to royalty, governments, groups, anyone that cares to listen, and I'm here today. It's as simple as that. But I want to run through not just 5G, I will run through 5G thoroughly, but I want to go back, I just want to take you back and explain why we are in this mess that we're in. Microwaves were known to cause illness to all living things, and as John said, I'll talk for about an hour, then we'll have a break. Anyone who has to leave because they have other things they have to get on with, that's, and then I'll just stay for the questions after that. Microwaves were known to cause harm and were documented way back in 1932. By the 1940s, 1950s, it was apparent that a lot of harm could be caused from low-level microwave radiation. And the first organisation to really document this, because then the military were involved in all of the research, in 1971, the Naval Medical Research Institute, which is the United States Research Institute, they referenced 2,300 documents listing that microwaves could harm any living thing, including humans. So by 1971, everything was known that we needed to know about microwaves. Since 1971, it has been a cover-up. Since then. I think this is one of the most shameful documents ever to be published in our 40,000 generation human history. Following this, the year following this, there was a meeting with the World Health Organization, who are designed to represent us and keep us safe. The document here for the World Health Organization listed 107 very serious illnesses, 107 different types of illness that we can contract from long-term, low-level, lower than you have in your cell phones and Wi-Fi at home, lower than any of that. We're not talking microwave oven strength or radar strength. This is what they call below thermal, where you wouldn't even notice it. So the year after all of these were noticed, there was a top secret meeting. It was in Poland. they listed 107 major illnesses or major things that can go wrong right through the body, from the brain to the skin to the heart. It was, I don't know who authorized this, but somebody who has power over the World Health Organization, they ordered this to be kept top secret. And I have my own copy. It's still stamped. It's stamped with a big red top secret. And even today, they will not admit it exists, and even today they will not let you have a copy or explain it. So the World Health Organization, whom the world trusts to look after it, are actually sitting on a top secret document explaining that microwaves, all microwaves for all systems, can cause major damage to everybody. I think that document is only superseded by this one. Following this talk, and I was around during all of this going on, following this talk, the United States Defense Intelligence Agency sent a letter to all Western governments, a top secret letter to all Western governments. And by Western governments, I'm talking Europe, the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, Canada. And basically, this letter explains why we are in this problem today. And it says, if the more advanced nations of the West are strict in the enforcement of exposure standards, there could be unfavourable effects on industrial output and military functioning. In other words, what they're asking governments to do is set a safety level that can never be challenged in court by you. And what they are saying is that the only reason for this is to protect industrial output, or if we put it in one word, profit. And they also wanted it kept from the military because the military and the police are very heavy users of microwave transmitters with their communication systems. And it is known and published that particularly military personnel, and I have known 8, and we had one here, one of our Royal Marines, fairly recently, got a life sentence for murder in the field, Sergeant Blackman, it was on the news. And it is published that if you use these a lot, it can cause severe neurological harm and make you not think straight when you are trying to make a decision. When Sergeant Blackman was being court-martialed, I sent all of the evidence to his defence counsel. I spoke to them on the day of his trial or his court-martial, and the words I got back from his defence counsel, who are of course government, because it's a court, it's a military court, the word I got back from his defence counsel is, or was, we will not use that in his defence. It could have been proven, he could have been found not guilty, they would not introduce the evidence. Now, this document here, asking Western governments to set a safety level, basically that could not be challenged. The governments went back to an engineer called Schwann in 1953 who calculated that from radiation entering your body, you should not be exposed to it for more than 1 hour, and it is a thermal calculation only. In other words, it is how warm the radiation will heat you in 1 hour. He set that level in 1953. That is the one that stands today. It has never been updated, changed, or anything. He ignored, as governments are today, they ignore the effect of the electrical and magnetic parts of the electromagnetic wave, how they interact with the cellular processes and the cellular processes in the brain. All of that is ignored. What the government have today in this country, your safety level and mine, and in the other countries, for 42% of the planet, the safety level is if you do not feel warm, too warm, in 6 minutes, everything is deemed safe for a lifetime's exposure, whether you're pregnant or not. 6 minutes. The clever part of that is they know, and I know, but with respect you probably don't, microwaves warm from the inside out. And your heat sensors are not on the inside of your body, they're on the outside of your body, on your skin. So, by following the United States guidance here, what we have done is we have set a safety level for every single person in the United Kingdom. It is only valid for 6 minutes. When they put a pylon up with all the transmitters up, it's still only safe for 6 minutes. But what they're saying is within 6 minutes it would be impossible for you to go to court because you don't have the biological processes to detect it. So they're on a win-win situation. And this is in this document. Then, after they advise the Western governments not to be strict with the safety level, they say if you are exposed to microwave radiation below thermal levels, that is it. All communications, cell phones, towers, Wi-Fi, everything, smart meters, they are all classified as below thermal level. So all the communications industry are below thermal level. And then they list all of the illnesses. And they start off, I'm not going to read the whole page, they start off with headache, fatigue, perspiring, dizziness, menstrual disorders, irritability, agitation, tension, drowsiness, sleeplessness, depression, anxiety, forgetfulness, lack of concentration, and then they go right through down the body to neurotoxins crossing the blood-brain barrier, developing severe neuropathological symptoms, dying or becoming seriously impaired. So that is what is known, and that is what you can expect from these microwaves. At the same time, again, these are all obviously classified top secret, but I still have my friends in the spy world, so I get copies. This again is classified. World Health Organization, again something they will not share with you. At this time, 80% of their data to do with microwaves shows cancer and neurological damage and other forms of harm. 80%. and it is all being kept from you and everybody. Our governments, when they make a decision, they rely on the minister to stand up in Parliament and brief Parliament. The minister goes to Public Health England, what was another name, I can't remember now, but what had a previous name, they keep changing them. Public Health England. Public Health England go to what is the International Commission for Non-Ionising Radiation Protection. They are the key body. I happen to know that the emeritus professor who advises this international commission, several years ago when I was talking to a government, I exposed him as a person who is being paid by the communications industry and represent us at the World Health Organization. Michael Rapatoli, now I think he is professor at the University of Rome. And those of you here who have spoken to governments, you will know and you will confirm that when you talk to a government, you sign to say that you have freedom of speech, like MPs in our parliament. You have freedom of speech, but if you lie, they will take you straight to their jail, and they start talking years, not weeks. And I took advantage of this freedom of speech, and I said, I believe the gentleman who was Professor Rapatoli, I said, I believe the gentleman following me is a paid consultant for the communications industry and an advisor, the chief advisor for the World Health Organization, and I believe that that is a conflict of interest. And they said, thank you very much, and they asked him, and he had to admit that he was. It was taken to court, he lost his job at the World Health Organization, but the damage was done. And it is still his work which is being quoted today. The International Commission that our government scientists rely on, and 42% of the planet, the advice they give to our government is, it's not secret, it's in a document, but I have been to many, many places in the UK, and I've been to many, many countries that wave the international certificate in my face and say, we follow these guidelines. And I say, good, thank you very much. And I say this to any council, and if I can talk to Exeter and Devon and that, it is the first question I ask. And I say, you follow the international guidelines? Yes. Good. Have you read the document you are quoting at me and you are making your decision from? And that is a good question to ask them. If you are facing a councillor or a decision maker, they all abide by this. And a good question is, have you read it? And to date, and I've been doing this 25 years with Sue, right, Sue's around. Yeah, we've been doing this some 25 years, now. And to date, I've never met a single decision maker who has read the document that they are quoting and they are setting their levels from. And I have, and I'm going to read just a couple of sentences, because if they did read it, we wouldn't be in this mess. First of all, it says that it is the International Commission, it is a general guideline. It is not law. It is a general guideline to measure heat only. Nothing else. A general guideline. Then they say, for example, children, the elderly, chronically ill people might have a lower tolerance for one or more forms of non-ionizing radiation. Those are our microwaves. They may have a lower tolerance than the rest of the population. It also says that there are particular members of the population who are sensitive. So they are acknowledging that certain members of the population may suffer. And decision makers are advised to. I've got it here. It says, applying these general procedures may differ across the non-ionizing radiation spectrum. These procedures, and this is for decision making, these procedures require scientific judgment. That is, reviewing scientific literature and determining appropriate reduction factors. Now, if you are a decision maker and you have people who can be made sick, you are required, if you are following this, and they are, you are required to find out who is sick. You are required to read scientific literature, and you are required to set a standard that is below the level that people cannot be made ill from. That requires evidence. If you say to me, Barry, you are giving us a talk, I want to see the evidence of where you get your information from, I would say good. When John came out last week and said to me, will I do a talk? I said yes. And in my living room at the moment, I have 1,700 research papers spread out in groups. You're welcome to come and pick up any one of 1,700 papers, which I've reduced to this, and I will happily answer questions on all of them. Now, if you are a school principal or a governor or an employer or a councillor, and you are making a decision, you must be able to validate your decision. You cannot just say, well, that's going up, and not know the safety guidelines, and not know who's going to be affected. It requires research. I want to move on to 5G. I want to move on to 5G, and I'd like to specify here, I really know nothing about law, but I'm going to read law, although I don't know what it means. But there are people here who will pick it up. This is a legal document from a European legal firm of lawyers who looked into 5G. They looked into 5G, and I just want to read a part of their conclusion, which is just 4 lines, please. It says, and this is dated this year, and I think it was May this year. International firm of lawyers. It is the conclusion of this legal opinion that establishing and activating a 5G network as it is currently described would be in contravention of current human and environmental laws enshrined in the European Convention on Human Rights, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, EU regulations, and the Berne and Bonn Conventions. Now, 5G isn't new. There are, to my knowledge, 17 research papers showing 5G causes harm. Or 17 plus 1. This is the one I've brought along. This, again, is a top secret document. You'll gather that I'm some sort of a whistleblower. This is a top secret document. In 1977, the Soviets experimented on the 5G frequencies, the ones that we are now putting up. And they experimented on large animals, 97 humans, and a series of rats, something I vehemently disapprove of, but I couldn't have stopped it. And they experimented on animals as well. I'd like to read you the results of 5G. This is going to upset some of you. The Soviets, they used a level of 5G radiation. I'm not going into units, I'm just going to give a number. The Soviets used a level of 62 units of 5G radiation. Now, you can legally today be exposed to 140 level, 140 units. The Soviets used it was 62. They used 62 units. You can have a level of 140, whether you like it or not, more than twice. The Soviets, in their 62 units of energy, the Soviets exposed the species I mentioned for 15 minutes a day for 60 days. So in other words, a total of 15 hours. 15 minutes a day, 60 days, 15 hours exposure. They found demyelinization of the nervous system, in other words, the ability to then develop motor neuron disease. I don't know, I'd like to know any neurologists here, demyelinization of the skull, of the brain. I imagine all sorts of some form of neurological damage, but demyelinization of the nervous system, which is the insulating coat around the nerves. Ultra-sensitivity to light, noise, pain, skin, liver, heart problems, brain neurological problems, adrenals, kidneys, blood, and eyes, specifically eyes. Those of you protesting against 5G, two very eminent professors in Europe, Emeritus Professor Rainer Nyberg from Finland and Leonard Hardell, who is a professor of oncology in Sweden. They wrote a brilliant letter, which I have here. They wrote a brilliant letter. It is an open letter. You can have copies. It is addressed to Mr. Secretary General and the Nordic Prime Ministers. They are both medical doctors, and they also went into that from their deduction of research. Fetuses, children, stem cells in children, human sperm, the honeybee will also suffer. It's known, the honeybee, there was an experiment carried out recently. The honeybee is totally saturated by 24 gigahertz, which is going to be a very, very common 5G frequency. It will wipe out the bees. It totally saturates every fluid in their body, along with all the other Gs, but 5G is particularly bad. The letter, the open letter from the two professors, they go into, again, European laws and United Nations laws, and it is a particularly good letter which you can photocopy and take to anybody that you want to stop 5G. One thing that really upsets me about 5G, it is known throughout the world. I started getting phone calls from all over this country and all over the world with people saying, why are they cutting down our trees? And I looked into this, and it has been discovered that trees inhibit or stop 5G. And I won't go through all of the countries in the world and all of the places now, but councils and governments are now felling trees to make way for 5G. I had a call from Malta, because the reasons are varied from what country you are. In Malta, a lady rang me, a lady councillor that I knew when I was out there, she rang me to say, the government are pulling all the trees down so that the motorists can have a better view of our congested roads. Sydney have just put a straightforward application in, as they would in Australia, and saying, we're going to cut all the trees down because we want 5G. Something that worries me here, in our advertiser, our local advertiser, not last Friday, the one before, those of you that saw the front page, we are to cull 70 million trees throughout the UK. One of the reasons given is to stop the spread of ash dieback. Teambridge have announced they're going to cut down 90,000 trees. I'm not sure if that's for the same reason. Devon, in the same paper, Devon Council, and I'd like to talk to them, Devon Council are going to cut down 440,000 trees along the roads. 440,000 trees along the roads. I'm not sure why, but with 5G being 5G, 5G is going to be put on lampposts and mainly along the roads, because it's a very short-range microwave, but 5G is stopped by trees, and if you want 5G, you have to cut the trees down. And I would like the council, if I can talk to them, to get, I would like a second opinion on how many trees, whether it is really 70 million that need culling, just to prevent ash dieback. I don't know what ash dieback is, I don't know how fast it spreads, but I would hate to think this is the decision of one person who is signing a contract for 5G. And I think we need to look into who's cutting all the trees down, and we want an honest answer really on why. Another thing that concerns me, and a gentleman here mentioned it, a friend of Sir Julian Rose, trees are, it concerns me, trees are not just trees. People don't realise the importance of a tree. Around 3/4 of every fish is tree. And people don't realise that. When you study the biological webs, food chains, trees shred their leaves. The leaves go into the streams, they decay. Microorganisms feed on this decay, and it spreads down into the lakes, the seas, the rivers. And the microorganisms, you have this whole ecology where you have the microorganisms and the smaller fish and the bigger fish. But when you analyse a fish, and this is published, when you analyse a fish, around 70% of a fish comes from a tree. And within this process, you have microorganisms which are called coccolithopores. And coccolithopores, this simple little microorganism in a very, very long chain, but they are vitally important to us. Because in their little cycle of what they do, they produce a molecule called dimethyl sulfite. And they release dimethyl sulfite, it goes into the atmosphere and drifts into the sky. And at this point in time, dimethyl sulfite is the only molecule, the only chemical, that is known to be used in cloud formation. So when we are cutting down our 70 million trees and everything else, when you start interfering with the trees, you interfere with the microorganisms in the lakes, and by that you interfere with the cloud. You interfere with cloud formation. When you interfere with that, as the biologists will know, you interfere with the water cycle, the carbon cycle, the rock cycle, all of the other cycles. They are all interlinked. So if we're going to cut down trees for 5G, we are going to start changing the weather. And with less clouds, we get less rain, and it bounces on. So it's not just a question of let's cut down 70 million trees just in this country. We are going to change the biological cycles. The other great culprit, and two university biology professors specialising in this have said this, we are going to affect the insects. We know 5G will wipe out the bees. But the other insects will also suffer. They have a very large surface area to volume ratio. In other words, they're a bit like a sail on a yacht. Insects and trees are designed for a large surface area. They have big wings. Insects, they will pick up the radiation. If you go over the Amazon forest and look at the canopy of the leaves, it is an enormous surface area. And the moment you start putting up your 2.25 million satellites and things, Trees cannot stand 5G. It kills them. There have been experiments on aspen trees and other plants. We are going to destroy the trees with 5G. If we don't cut them down, we're going to destroy them and put the satellites up. Okay, we're getting there. We're on time, okay. Altogether, there are, I won't read the list, altogether there are 168 countries trying to stop 5G. So it's not just me, there are 168 countries trying to stop 5G, that is published. In this country, in fact, the editor of a science journal, Simon Best, rang me just last night and said, "Are you reading a list of people who are stopping 5G, Barry?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Will you add Frome, Wells and Glastonbury to that list?" He lived out that way. I do know that Bristol, Liverpool, areas of London, there are lots of people trying to stop it or successfully stopping it. It is not just here. So it is happening. And I have a list here of 24 countries that are having a national anti-5G day. I won't read out the list. There are 24 countries here. On the 25th of January, this coming January, they're going to have a Stop 5G Day. So it is gaining momentum worldwide. I'd want to just run through what I have read about law, because I know there's a gentleman who wants to hear this and he needs to leave. You won't have heard about this in this country, but we've actually had a legal win success in this country. You don't hear about this over the BBC or the other broadcasting companies because they are owned and are in business with the main communications industries. But we've had a teacher in this country have full sickness leave and full compensation and early retirement because he taught in a classroom with Wi-Fi. And it made him ill. Went to court and he won. Which we actually have a precedent in this country. In fact, there are 7 countries where people have gone to court. In one country, Italy, they have 5 High Court judgments against the industry for people. There are 7 countries altogether where people have gone to court and won against the industry. Now, legal, I'll just read these out, and I don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm going to read them anyway. There is the UN Convention 1989, United Nations. Each state has a legal responsibility to protect children and ensure maximum development. Articles 19 and 6. Children's Act 1989, Part 3, Section 17, places a legal obligation on local authorities to protect children against harm or risk of harm. It stands apart from any other law because you can win with just a likelihood or a perceived risk. That is all that is necessary. It does not need proof. I think when a barrister was in my house, he said that is actually designed for children in care. So it means, it refers to children who are adopted or fostered or under council care. But in any school there is always one child under care somewhere. The Nuremberg Code, UN 1950, Article 7, prohibits any experiment without consent. These are all experiments. The Tetra airwave that police are using, that is actually designed as an experiment. I wrote the safety report condemning it. The Tetra airwave that they're still walking around with is designed as an experiment, an epidemiological experiment, to see how many people will get cancer. It is an experiment. Right. Under EU law, a strategic environmental assessment should be carried out before 5G. So, under EU law, a strategic environmental assessment should be carried out before 5G. A legitimate government, this is, the gentleman was talking to me about this, I don't understand what I'm saying here. This is a Treatise of Civil Government, Second Treatise, Chapter 2. A legitimate government must preserve the right to life, liberty, and health of its citizens. And you have the Health and Safety Directive, 1st of July in this country, 1st of July 2016, employers, in number 588, employers must protect those of higher susceptibility in their employment, monitor health for electromagnetic radiation, both thermal and non-thermal, and look for harm or symptoms of auditory, sensory disturbance, change in brain function, and anything else. And if you complain, the employer is under law to do something about it. Right. We are nearly finished. I just want to finish, please, because people may say to me, okay, Barry, where is the proof? Where is the evidence? I just have just a list of 17 things here. And then I'll answer questions if people have them on smart meters and Wi-Fi smart meters and anything else. I'll do all those after. I just want to finish off, please, with a list of 17 things. To let you know that not only is or was predicted back in 1971, but it is actually happening. Right. There are cases now from around the world of children dying from Wi-Fi in class. A GP, some of you may have heard of Dr. Erica Mallory Blythe, she runs a medical doctors organisation in the UK for medical doctors to stop all of this. And she has a list of 136 studies where children have been harmed in school from low-level radiation. There are, to my knowledge, 48 studies on child suicide. One of the first symptoms of microwave sickness is, and you can ask about the brain processes later, one of the first symptoms is suicidal tendencies. A paediatrician in Israel went into I'm sure this is a primary school, because I was asked to give evidence for a primary school. I think this is the same case. A paediatrician and a neurologist went into a school. They found 31 children with physical and neurological damage. They eliminated every other possible cause and determined that the 31 children, just in one school, were being harmed by Wi-Fi. He gave evidence, this was a Dr. Bella, he gave evidence in the High Court in Israel for this. It's not surprising, I wrote a paper several years ago where a sweep was done across France and Spain, and just a straightforward sweep right across France and Spain, and they found 200 schools that had Wi-Fi and transmitters in the school grounds. They found 200 schools with cancer clusters with staff and children. 200 schools at that one time, and published them. And there were 8 different types of cancer in the school. Pregnant women, there is a 20-fold higher danger in the womb, which of course is fluid, a 20-fold higher level of danger in the womb because it absorbs more radiation than the rest of the body. Nature Publications, probably the world's leading scientific journal, has said non-ionizing radiation, as with cell phones, will cause higher miscarriage. The World Health Organization published that at these levels you can expect a 47.7% miscarriage or genetically damaged child rate. 47.7%. Now, if you mathematically look at this, and when I talk to governments, I say, don't think of that as a number. Think of that. 47% is roughly half your exposed population of pregnant women. In 20 years, you're going to lose a half of your healthy children. A further 20 years, if you do nothing, you are down to a quarter. And a further 20 years, you are down to 1/8. In 60 years, you will only have 1 in 8 of your children being born healthy. That is the World Health Organization, not me, saying this. And very recently, last year or the year before, the European Academy for Environmental Medicine, not a bunch of idiots by any means, very, very talented and clever doctors and professors, they decided to test this, and they said it's not 47.7%, we make it 48%. So they've come out really with the same figure. Very, very frightening. You won't have seen this on the news. Again, along this same line, Michael Bevington, who is the editor of another scientific journal, he has published This for Animals, and he has said that quite a few species could be extinct in 5 generations. With humans, I'm saying it's 3. He's saying with animals it's 5. But that's the way it is going. As an example of this, and again this isn't published because they don't really want you to know about this, but there is a site of special scientific interest in Australia. It is a mountain range and forest with beautiful countryside, nature reserve. It's called Nardi, N-A-R-D-I. There are now 153 papers, to my knowledge, on this, because the communications industry said, what a beautiful place, let's set up our transmitters, and they went zonk, 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 and within a few years, everything that could leave has left, everything that could not leave has died, the trees have died, and the last paper I read, the scientists said even the microorganisms that keep the soil alive have died. The entire site of scientific interest, Site of Special Scientific Interest, NARDI, N-A-R-D-I in Australia, they're trying to keep it secret, but if you go to it on the internet, you will find that there are 153 papers, if not more, and the entire site is now dead. A World Health Organization scientist has said children can have long-term and DNA damage from this. There is a global increase now attributed to microwaves, 13% increase in childhood cancers. There are 26 studies, separate studies, showing Wi-Fi in a school classroom can cause cancer. A gentleman, Lamech, L-A-M-E-C-H, 2014, a couple of years ago, published a paper on all of the harm that you can expect from smart meters. There is a huge frontal temporal lobe where you hold your cell phones, a huge increase in temporal lobe cancer. A Swiss study found from 700 children using cell phones that they were suffering from memory loss. I won't go into why. And Martin Paul, Emeritus Professor Martin Paul, Washington State University, I've met him, know him well. He has made a list, if you want positive proof to put into somebody, research papers that have been independently funded, independently peer-reviewed by top science magazines, independently published. There are 18 showing fertility damage, 21 showing DNA damage, cancer, 13 showing that the pulses, the modulations, will cause it's up to 700 different types of illness. 25 psychiatric illnesses and 35 on cancer, proving these cause cancer. Finally, insects are down now around 70% from microwaves. 24 gigahertz hour, one of the frequencies we are using, is known to decimate bees, and this year when they were challenged in Parliament, the minister stood up after having everything thrown at the minister from MPs, made this statement in June 2019. Here we are. There is no evidence of harm from electromagnetic frequencies. Therefore, this House must consider that everything is safe. Now, that was this year. One thing that frightens me most, and it's a personal thing, we're having 250,000 plus satellites going up. There are 9 companies putting satellites up. The BBC are involved in some of them, as are other communications. The one thing I think that worries me most, a personal thing, is that Google are taking charge of 5G the whole of the Amazon forest. And this is where we are. And this is why I came here. For John.
We want to thank you, Barry, so much for coming today and for all the information that you've provided and all of the expertise. We're going to commence with a 10-minute break at the back of the hall. As I said, we just got the donation bucket to cover expenses. We've got some stickers, we've got some flyers, and we're going to have Q&A after the break time. And I just want to ask in the hall here, are any of the other candidates here today? Because they've all been invited, the other candidates that are running as MPs for this election. Can you put your hands up if you're here, if you're a candidate for Totnes constituency? Don't see any hands up. Okay. They're all invited for today, so no worries. Okay, so 10-minute break. You're not here today. And there were attempts to prevent me from participating in the hustings by the host and also the organizer, and I actually filmed it on my YouTube channel. I actually filmed what actually took place during the time when they were trying to prevent me, and my YouTube channel's 5G Awareness, so please have a look at that. There's no political party that's really addressing 5G, that's saying, look, we're going to have a halt on 5G, and this is the reason why I'm running as an independent. And another thing that people get confused by, and I just had a chat with Barry, is when you see antennas going up in your town, in the street lights, one of the technical parameters of 5G is densification. So if you see 4,000 4G antennas go up on the street lights, that's 5G. Densification is a technical parameter of 5G. Electric cars will be part of 5G, the LED street lights. This is all part of the 5G infrastructure, 5G, the Internet of Things. And we're getting, if we allow this to happen, we'll be covered with this mesh of wireless radiation. And a lot of the metals, such as cobalt, lithium, a lot of the mining is very, very toxic to the land for a lot of these metals that are being mined to produce these electric cars, solar panels. So I just think, do your own research on this. That's all I would recommend. We've got a couple of people who want to mention something. Charlie, who's an activist in Exeter. He's been a real help with me, helping to organise 5G events, and also Justin, who supported me at the hustings and who really helped. If it wasn't for Justin, I wouldn't have been able to get up on stage. It was amazing to have such a great team of people. So I'd just like to thank you. Just like to let Justin and Charlie make a couple of announcements.
Thank you, John. I just want to introduce Rhiannon, who's just doing a brilliant job in stopping 5G in Exeter and Devon. So I'm going to pass you over to Rhiannon.
Charlie, who's doing a brilliant job in stopping 5G in Exeter and Devon, and also some of our friends here who've been campaigning every month at Devon County Council to stop 5G. Would you like to raise your hand so people can see you and talk to you and join you? Yes, it's amazing work. And so we've been in every month to Devon County Council. And as a consequence of that, one of the things they're now doing, and that's why I'm briefly speaking here, is they've now put a questionnaire on their website, and the questionnaire is on 5G, whether or not we do want 5G.
It's been extended till the end of the month.
It's been extended till the end of the month, which is amazing. So I'm asking you to please all fill in the questionnaire on the Devon County Council website. Ask all your friends, family, everyone you know to fill it in, and tell them we do not give consent to the rollout of 5G. Give them all your reasons, all websites where they can read up why we don't want 5G. And on your chairs, you'll find these little leaflets, and on the back of the leaflet is the link to the questionnaire. So you've just got to type it in and fill it in with as many reasons as we all have. And just tell everybody, we want thousands of people filling this in. After 1 week there were 400, so we're still going strong till the end of the month. Thank you.
Just right, it's a very simple questionnaire to fill in. So there's only a few things, very quick and very easy. The forms are on your seats, we really need help. And Devon, as a county, is the first county in the UK that's taken 5G to scrutiny, so well done everyone.
Last meeting, did you mention that? About 100 people?
Yes, yeah. Well, that's Exeter City Council that are also going to scrutiny too. Yeah.
Well, good evening. Thank you very much. My name is Justin Walker. I joined the Ecology Party back in 1978. I wouldn't say I was one of the originals, but I'm certainly one of the few at the beginning. And from that, I was on party council, I organised conferences and everything else. I've now we morphed into the British Constitution Group. That's where I'm working with the new Chartist movement, and that's all about common law and constitution. I'll come on to that in a moment. The first ecology party in the world was in New Zealand. It was called the Values Party. And I can safely say that for the first 8 or 9 years in the Ecology Party, we really did stand for values, and we stood for principles. Something has happened in the Green Party because 6 weeks ago I was thrown out of the Green Party conference in Newport. What was my crime? I knocked on the press office door because I knew Caroline Lucas was in there and I was with my friend Eddie. And I went in and said, "Hello, Caroline, and please bear in mind I was on party council when we agreed to take Caroline on as our full-time press officer. So she does know me. In fact, she's stayed at my home." And I said, "Caroline, lovely to see you. Why are you resisting 5G? Why isn't the Green Party leadership getting behind the campaigners who were actually protesting outside the conference, wanting to know why the Green Party leadership were not actually campaigning to stop 5G?" And she just looked at me and said, "Oh, it's not me. Oh, blah, 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 blah." And by that time, some minders came along, and I was frog-marched out of the conference. I think we've got to ask a few questions about what's happening. Transition Towns, Rob Hopkins. Now, I had said to him, 5G and everything. He said, "No, it's safe, it's safe, it's safe, it's safe." So I'm calling him out tonight. I want some public debates with Rob Hopkins and Transition Towns. We'll have very friendly, because that's my way of doing things. We keep things very friendly. But with the information that we've heard tonight from Barry, we need to have some public debates about the future of Totnes and the direction it's going. And we're calling ourselves Real Greens, because I genuinely feel the real
Nothing personally against these groups or individuals. Nothing personally against them, but it was Rob Hopkins and the Green Party that tried to prevent me from taking part in the local election debate. All I said is that I want to stand and talk about 5G with the other candidates. I'll take my turn, but I'm here to stand against 5G. I was told I was not allowed, but Justin helped me to get on stage so that I could participate in the election debate, which should be open to all candidates in the election.
They overlooked a small point, the Representation of the People's Act. I like being a barrack room lawyer. But let me come on to the second point. Now, Barry mentioned legislation and the UN, the European Union. Yes, let's use their legislation, but there was a difference between legislation and law. Legislations are rules of society. They're not laws. Everyone thinks they're laws. The only law is natural law, common law. Now, how many of you here have ever heard of a thing called annulment by jury? Right. Quite simply, and the judges, who I'm afraid are treasonous because they don't inform the jurors of this power, a jury can annul any legislation if somebody is charged under particular legislation, a statute passed by self-serving politicians, agenda-driven politicians. If that jury decides unanimously that that person is not guilty, even though he's breached whatever legislation, that automatically annuls that legislation off the statute books. How many people knew that? We are a common law country. Now, Sarah Wollaston At the last general election, in a public meeting, I asked her a simple question: are we a common law country? And she went, what do you mean? So I then informed her, and she went, oh. That is the level of ignorance in Parliament. And I'm afraid when I saw the candidates on Saturday night, I don't think that, well, I think the levels of ignorance are going to remain roughly the same. So it's like for the fact that the government can create its own money based on the wealth of the nation. We did it in 1914 to stop the run of the banks. But they all wanted hushed up now. We're not here to discuss money. But what I'm saying is there are some really big issues that are not being discussed by the parties and by the politicians. And this is how they control us, the deep state. I think I've talked enough, but please, do not be frightened. We, the people, are actually in charge. It's just our ignorance that's stopping it from happening. Next year, that's all going to change, and we're organising. Thank you.
I'd just like to commence the Q&A, and you know, I'm going to ask one question to Barry myself, just to kick things off. And I'd like to ask Barry, what's been your engagement so far up until now with any MPs in the Totnes constituency? And I'm aware that it's been a while since you've come to give a talk here. Have any MPs reached out to you? I mean, up until now you had Sarah Wollaston. Could you enlighten us a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. Excuse me. There was a lady rang me, she may even be here, a mother of two, and asked if I would come and give a talk in Totnes, probably a year and a half ago. And I said, yes, I'll happily come and give a talk in Totnes, I don't live that far away, but on one condition, that the MP attends. Because at the end of the day, I can talk to several hundred people and it gets diluted and diluted, then it goes to the MP, and the MP is the only person that can take it to Parliament and cause trouble. And the lady, the mother of two, she went to the MP and said what I asked, and the MP refused to talk about anything to do with electromagnetic waves, refused to turn up, and I've had, I think over the last 4 years, 3 or 4 people phone me to say, would I come and speak in Totnes? And I said, yes, I will come any time of the day or night, any time. And any day I will clear my diary, but your MP must be there, because what I have really doesn't translate second-hand. And the MP, for whatever reasons, has not turned up, and I've not been there. I think this is my 4th talk in Totnes for the last 20 years, so something like that. Yeah. It's my 4th talk. But I stopped coming when the MP would not turn up.
And she's a doctor.
And she's a doctor, yes. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Barry. Thanks very much for coming. We love your work, very, very much appreciated. A couple of quick things. Firstly, the NADI Australian experiment that killed everything that couldn't run. I wanted to ask you, is that going to be the same thing that's going to be ubiquitous everywhere if we allow 5G to come, right? And the second thing I wanted to ask you, please, is can it all be done by fibre optic? I just wanted you to clarify that. Instead of 5G, the same thing could be done with the same power frequency to help everybody get faster speeds, please.
Okay.
Can you repeat? Did everyone hear? I'll pass the mic backwards and forwards. That might be the best.
Sorry.
The first question was, is the NADI Site of Special Scientific Interest a forerunner of the rest of the planet? I don't think it's possible to kill everything everywhere on the planet. There are always things that will survive. I think it is the way we are going. If we are cutting down the trees anyway to make way for 5G, and we are destroying the insects with all the other Gs, and it's not just that, we are harming the farm animals, even your household pets. Any biologist here, any scientist here will know that when you come down to anything living, we all have the same genetic 4 bases inside our nucleus of our cell. We all have the same 4 bases. And whether you are an X-ray or a gamma ray and you go straight through the cell and you destroy the DNA directly, or with microwaves it works the other way around. You destroy the cell from the outside, and anyone here wants to know, I'll talk you through the whole thing, but you destroy the cell from the outside and then the rot creeps through, a bit like woodworm, but still gets to the DNA. So any living thing will be slowly destroyed by microwaves. There are only 3 things I think that are impervious to microwaves. Bacterium thrive on microwaves, which when you are killing trees with microwaves and they become weaker, and you are also strengthening the bacterial infections that they're having, the trees are in a no-win situation, the same as anything else. I think scorpions are impervious to microwaves, and there's an animal, a microorganism called a tardigrade that NASA just cannot kill, and they even send them into space and they come back quite happy. But I mean, for any living thing like we are, if nothing is done, we will get to the point where there isn't enough of a species left to maintain that species. You won't kill everything, but it will be doom as far as we know. That's the first question. The second question was, is fibre optic the answer? Yes, and I've got some, for instance, and this is a national security problem as well. When I talk to governments, let's have a look here. Now, people, the answer to all of this, everybody can have everything. You can all have everything to your heart's desire. All the cell phones, all the Wi-Fi, all the everything, if it is all connected by fibre optic cable from transmitter to source. It's not difficult in your house to plug in your phone to a fibre optic cable. It's not difficult if you go into a cafe and just plug in to fibre optic cable. And countries which are working on this and doing this, and they've already done it with their smart meters. I haven't had a question yet. I think I'm going to get one on smart meters, but you're not going to like what you hear. But countries that are now refusing wireless, and especially smart meters, and all smart meters have to be fibre optic cabled. We are looking at China, Italy, Austria, Germany, New England, don't know where that is, Victoria, Australia, Fairfax, British Columbia, the, I can't pronounce it, Osoyoos, O-S-O-Y-O-O-S, the Osoyoos Indians, probably Canada, and 14 US states. All of these are going as fast as they can to get fibre optic cable and get Wi-Fi out of the air. If everybody has fibre optic cable, you can have everything you've always wanted. It's faster, it carries more information, it's better, and we just leave the airwaves for the emergency services in emergencies. Then the risk would be so minimal we wouldn't even worry about it. But a brilliant question, sir. Yeah, we can have fibre optic cable. It's the only problem is that I will come to you, sir. The only problem is that the industry, which the Wi-Fi industry have, as a investigative reporter said in my house just a year ago, making a documentary, he said the industry has now made $13 trillion, and they're still making enormous amounts of money, and they're making this whilst the 5G and all the other cables are coming out. They are too impatient making money to allow, just to stop. If they just stopped and concentrated everything on fibre optic cable, then we wouldn't have this problem. There would be no problem. But it's just a question of greed. They want to make as much, as quickly, whilst they can. And then within a few years everything will be fibre optic cabled, probably, and the threat will have gone. But it's just a question of greed, and it's not the first time. Look at lead in petrol, look at smoking, BSC, look at everything. It's all to do with protecting your back and making money.
So another mic here, just going to testing.
You need to put the switch.
Testing. Yep, turn it on. Testing.
Okay. Oh no, it's working now, isn't it?
Testing. Are you working? Maybe.
That's it.
You're working, aren't you? Yeah. On Georgie.
Hi, thank you so much for being a whistleblower. I'm really keen to get hold of some of your documents. That would be great. That's such a wonderful thing. I'm really interested in the fibre optic situation. I know that it's that 5G is very reliant on fibre optics, and I'm wanting to know how we can, with the fibre optics being rolled out, how we can stop 5G coming in with that, because I know it's part of the 5G plan is to use fibre optics. So how do we kind of, it's like a fork in the road. How do we sort of edge in the right direction when we can't, we want fibre optics, but we don't want it 5G fibre optics?
I'm not sure I understand the question. We have fibre optic, and what you don't want is 5G going down the fibre optic.
It's 5G is scheduled to go down fibre optics.
Yeah.
Because we want to get rid of the 5G, we want the fibre optics bit's all right, but we don't want the package they've got at the moment is to have 5G with fibre optics.
Why? Well, that seems like he just explained that's the perfect solution.
Fibre optics would be great, but
yeah, 5G down fibre optics isn't a problem. It's the wireless that's the problem, not the fibre.
Yes, and that would be at the end of it. So you've got the fibre. And I'm not a scientist, but you've got the fibre optics running through, and then the wireless 5G at the end of it.
No. No wireless 5G.
Yes.
Everything is done fibre optic cable.
You can hardwire. Yes, that would be ideal. That would be ideal, but the government's plan is to have fibre optics and 5G.
Oh, it is. But what I'm trying to do, and we are getting somewhere, 58% of the planet is trying to stop the 5G satellites going up. apart from 5G, there are security implications when the Americans are putting up loads and loads of satellites over China and Russia and all of the other places. 58% of the planet are trying to stop it, and we're not doing a bad job at the moment. But 5G will need to be no wireless at all, absolutely no wireless. It goes straight from the transmitter into the fibre optic cable without being transmitted through the air, right up to source. We get rid of all microwaves out of the air. Does that make sense?
Yes, I'm not scientifically minded so far.
But we take all the microwaves out the air, and it comes through a pipe like gas and water. And you plug in, and it goes in straight in. There is no wireless.
Barry, could I just say that isn't the problem in rural areas that they want to use fixed, or they're already using fixed wireless masts, which feed...
The problem, as I understand it, is that this is already existing in Exmoor and Dartmoor and places like this, where you have Airband and Eclipse, is that they use fixed wireless masts which transmit through the airwaves, hence your issue about 5G, which is correct in that respect. And then they feed into FTTP, fibre to the premises. So they go into people's homes in fibre, but back in nature, they are still a wireless mast that's irradiating nature. I mean, my understanding is that in order to avoid that, we would need to be able to connect in rural areas through fibre, and that's a problem for rural areas because it just doesn't exist. I mean, I take my stuff down the copper lines and I'm fine with it, but I can't get the 10 megawatts that we're all supposed to have. I don't care about that. But, I mean, I think you just need to clarify that it's in rural areas, we're still going to be really vulnerable to the wireless transmissions. And that's, I think, what the issue you have with 5G.
Is that correct?
Yep. The problem is everything is coming out too quick. And that is the problem. China have already developed 6G. They have 37 universities now producing 6G. And before 5G is even up, they will have 6G out. Now, the problem is the technology is going too fast. There's not a single safety test being done on anything. Now, if you wanted to run an experiment on anything, it takes a good... any scientist here will tell you that if you want to run an experiment on anything, it will take about 10 years, because it's generally 6 years for the experiment, and then another few years to write it up, another couple of years excuse me, to get it peer-reviewed and everything. Now, the industry are in too much of a hurry, making too much money to wait 10 years. If we said we want fibre optic cable in all the rural areas, and everybody make fibre optic cable and everybody lay it out, which is not impossible to get fibre optic cable to rural areas, it could be done, but it cannot be done at the speed that they want. And that is the problem, because they are making too much money too quickly. And before you even hear of it, 6G is going to be out, and then they're already thinking 7G. 6G is in 37 universities in China. And it's just too quick. Not a single safety test is done, not a single environmental test is done. But if we could stop everybody and say, let's get the infrastructure in that will carry it safely to the rural areas, there wouldn't be a problem. But whilst they're building this and saying it's quicker and cheaper, we'll just put a satellite up and beam it straight at you. Or we'll put it on, for instance, each lamppost here, when they put 5G on, each lamppost has as many as 1,000 different transmitters in for varying frequencies, pulse frequencies, modulations. Each lamppost can have as many as 1,000, and they're going to put them 100, 150 metres apart. And the waveform, I will come down, there's no need to set your hand up.
That is absolutely untrue.
I'm sorry, sir, it's what I've read in the scientific paper.
Sorry, can you sit down and wait your turn? Because Barry's still answering. I'm sorry, can you sit down and wait your turn, please? I'm sorry, if you could have some good manners, sir, and please sit down and wait your turn. We'll pass the microphone to you in a little while. I'm sorry, sir, I'm going to have to ask you to sit down and wait your turn.
Okay, I'm quoting what I have read in the scientific journals. There was a gentleman, obviously, with a differing opinion, and I think we should have that. Science is about argument, and a gentleman has a differing opinion, and I think we should hear it.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, you've been waiting a while. Let's give.
I've been asked to make an announcement from the local group, EMF Aware of Totnes. That stands for Electromagnetic Field Aware. And there's just two things I was asked to say. One that's already been dealt with quite well by two people about the Devon County Council questionnaire. And I just want to add quickly on that I signed loads and loads of questionnaires. 38 degrees makes them very long and complicated. This is a really easy one. You can say why you don't want it, and you could do it in 5 minutes on the line. The other thing, which is a bit more complex, is about the current voting thing at the moment, what we're doing tomorrow, the voting. I just wanted to say that last year, the total number of people for the Totnes MP seat was about over 42,000 people, of which the Conservatives, which was Sir Wollaston, got 27,000. Now, talking about the fibre optic, Labour have actually said they want to put out fibre optic for everybody, and there's a good chance there might be a hung parliament with Labour and Lib Dem close behind might well work with them. And what we don't want to do is to break up the vote, which will get rid of the Conservatives in this party. And it's great that this meeting's happened, and John's doing brilliant work fighting 5G, and he gets good publicity for it. But we don't want to break up the vote, because the truth of it is that John unfortunately won't read that 27,000 locally, but we've got to try and be tactfully voted. So the Lib Dems are probably going to be the best one.
I'd just like to say that the Lib Dems, Labour and the Conservatives had it in their manifestos that they're going to roll out 5G, so I'm really sorry to disappoint you on that one, but please read the manifesto. It's in there that Labour, Jeremy Corbyn, has announced that he wants to roll out 5G, and, you know, we can just have some Q&A here. I promised to give it to the chat. He's already... You there? Yeah, okay. You next, Trent, I'll hand it over.
So, just a couple of inaccuracies that I hear. Number one is, you talk about 6G being in the Chinese universities. Actually, you're confusing that with Wi-Fi 6, which is a different thing. Right?
The document.
That's the facts.
The document I have from. Can you hear me? Yeah, the document I have from the United States talks about China has. Okay, the document I have from the United States has said China has 37 universities working on 6G, not Wi-Fi 6, but is definitely 6G.
Chris, yeah.
That chap who talked about Labour's just left. It looks like he came just to make that point.
Yeah. There was a very interesting item on Radio 4 today on All in the Mind, and it's about mental health. And what they said was really interesting. They said that circular shapes are low frequency and they tend to calm people down. Angular shapes are high frequency and it tends to agitate people, causes them problems with their mental health. Now that is really significant with the argument with satellites, 5G, and shocking things of nature. If you apply that to nature and not just to us, then it has profound implications. And I just wanted to point that out because I feel it's very important information. They've only just discovered it. And I think it has a very profound implication for things like insects and why the insects are getting so disrupted. The insects, it's not just EMF, it's to do with light pollution as well. That causes them problems. But if you think about the satellites sending down 20,000 kilometres, and there's a lot of them already, let alone the amount they're going to... It's all done on angles. It's not just done in circles or, nice wave shapes. So that's just important extra information.
What was the name of the BBC?
All in the Mind. It's about
That's right.
Yep, okay.
Do you have any questions?
John, the chap over there with his hand up there.
Okay, we'll go to you next. Yep.
Thank you, Barry Trower, for all of your work. One of your videos that I watched, at the end, you spoke about scientists at the end of World War II that were hung for the experimentations that took part in the war, that were the crimes that are happening now with 5G are worse than what they were hung for. And I wonder if you could say a little bit more about that.
Yes, I was talking about, it was the Nuremberg trial at the end of World War II, where people who experimented on people and caused an immense amount of suffering and death, they were hanged. Straightforward. But here we have known experiments. Tetra airwave is an experiment, is an epidemiological study. It has been known since 1949 that low-level microwaves can and will kill a certain amount of people. The World Health Organization has published that women who are exposed to a level lower than what you would experience in a classroom can suffer a 47.7% miscarriage rate. Now, to me, that is murder. I call things by their natural... That is murder. You have electrosensitive people who commit suicide, and one of the problems we haven't come into today, it's an immensely complex problem, is the modulations put in to the carrier waves. It was known, and a part of my job during the Cold War when I spoke to the spies, and this was used at both Greenham Common and at the Catholics in Northern Ireland. When I spoke to the spies, I made a list of probably 25 or 30 different pulse frequencies that would go into the body with the microwave, or modulations, they tend to be called, 20 or 30, that could cause probably 40 to 50 neurological and physiological harm. There is a pulse frequency that is known to disrupt the orientation of the brain. There are pulse frequencies that can collapse the bell, collapse the lungs, change the rhythm of the heart. I had about 40 to 60 that were used as an experiment on people. Operation Pandora. Operation Pandora started in 1962, ran up until 1967, funded by the CIA, experimented on pulse frequencies, microwave, low-level pulse frequencies, to induce various new neurological states, various physical states. By 1967, it was published that all moods and emotions can be induced. All moods and emotions can be induced. A gentleman by the name of Penafil, P-E-N-A-F-I-E-L, in 1997 said that from his experiments he now has a list of pulses or modulations that go up to 600 that can induce various parts of the brain, various parts of the body to malfunction. So we're up to 600. But the phenomenon itself is not new. It goes back to the year 64 BC. The year 64 BC, a scientist called Ptolemy, spelled with a P, who's a Greek living in Egypt, found that if he built a solid wheel and drilled holes around the wheel, if he had a form of radiation, the sun or something glowing hot or whatever, if he spun the wheel at different rates, then it could induce, it was a party game, he could induce a soporific effect in the brain, or he could induce epileptic fits, and his paper from 64 BC is still used today by some people. I will come to it, I promise. But it is known, and Professor Mio, I think it is, from King Saud University, he published a paper very recently saying that when the pulses go into the brain from the cell phones or Wi-Fi, he showed that they penetrated right through the brain. And it's not just the microwaves, it is the modulations also that they change or can affect both the cyclotronic resonance frequency in the body and the circadian resonant frequencies, the clocks in the body, which are run by the hypothalamus. So it is a double whammy in the body from the pulse frequencies and the microwaves. And that is the basis of quite some nasty work. In fact, in 1990, Ronald Reagan reintroduced it. It was called Operation Sleeping Beauty. He reintroduced microwaves as stealth weapons to cause specific physiological and neurological harm. And you can, in fact, drive people to suicide. It's been known since the Cold War and used since the Cold War. So yes, and I think anyone who does this, coming back to the lady's question, to me, if you cause a person to commit suicide by beaming a particular frequency that they are susceptible to, and this has been shown by experiment, then to me it is no different to what was carried out at Nuremberg.
Chap at the back with his hand up for quite a while.
I'd just like to thanks Barry for everything you've done over the years, the tireless work you've done. My question's about Wi-Fi in schools. I know you've spoken about it a few times in the past. But the transmitters in the classrooms are now dual frequency, so they're 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz, and they're measuring anywhere from 0.3 volts a meter up to 3.0 volts a meter. Firstly, what would you consider a safe level in a classroom, if any? Secondly, is there anything you can do for the children to help protect them from the harm of radiation in form of supplementation or maybe protective clothing? And thirdly, if you had a child in school in this day and age, what route would you take to try and get the transmitters removed from the classrooms?
I was just looking for a quote from I'll just give a quote here, first of all. This is from a paediatric neurologist. I don't think you can get a better quote. This is from a paediatric neurologist. And she has written, pregnant women, concerning Wi-Fi, pregnant women and children, it can have an impact on the developing brain. We have an alarming increase in children with neurological harm over the past decade. The Stanford Institute of Science in California, Stanford Institute of Science in California, they published the two most lethal frequencies for the brain. They are both the Wi-Fi frequencies. The American government also published the two most lethal frequencies concerning wireless. They are both the Wi-Fi frequencies. Probably with no disrespect to anybody here, I think the cleverest person on the planet who knows this, Professor Yuri Grigoriev, chair of the Russian Federation for Nuclear and Atomic Sciences, came over here and said, whatever you do, do not put Wi-Fi in schools. It interrupts it's the CA1, CA3 pyramid cells in the hippocampus. It causes memory loss, it causes spatial orientation loss. It triggers the autoimmune system of the brain to attack itself, which I think is Graves' disease. But he came over here specifically to say to our government, do not put Wi-Fi in schools. He wrote an enormous article, which I have at home. It was published, and he basically said that not only are these two frequencies the most dangerous that could ever go into a brain, but when you consider that children absorb more radiation than adults because they are smaller, they are nearer the size of the areole, they have more moisture in their bodies, their electrical conductivity is different, they have organs which are the resonant size of Wi-Fi. He said the worst thing you can do is put Wi-Fi in schools. His article was published and nobody took a blind bit of notice. And they are still, the Stanford University, the American government, the Soviet head of nuclear and atomic sciences, they've all said, do not expose children to Wi-Fi. And we can have children in school with 30 Wi-Fi sets. But as I said, a teacher went to court who was in the classroom all day and has won his case. That is documented. I hate to think what we're doing to the children with Wi-Fi in class. I can't see any reason why you can't just fix a cable from the router down into where they are working. I can't see the problem with that. But the biggest danger, and when I wrote a paper on this, published in 2013. The biggest problem is with the girls, because the girls in the classrooms are sitting with all of their eggs in the ovaries. And the eggs in the ovaries, which when they get married or grow up and they start having children, the eggs in the ovaries do not at that time have the full immune system. In fact, the children don't have their immune system up and running properly anyway. The immune system isn't up and running until they're around 18. The bones are not fully developed until they're 27-ish. So the immune system in the child is not up and running, but the eggs in the ovaries do not have what is known as protein 53 and the nuclear core complex. We have them, and this is why some of us can fight radiation and other people can't. When your body is exposed to low-level radiation, and 4 professors have published, Schwartz, Provenich, Henry Lai, and Neil Cherry of Washington University, 4 professors have published that a very long-term low dose can be as dangerous or even more dangerous than a short high dose. And you have children sitting in school for 8 hours a day, which is quite a long low dose. And the problem with this is when you have a long low dose, even for people, and this is why you start getting your cancer clusters, and there are countries now taking down transmitters because of the death rate and the miscarry rate. When you have the transmitters up the way, you have this long low dose, but the radiation is still coming in. It is still doing its damage very, very slowly, but it is below the medical threshold to trigger the nuclear core complex, which are 30 proteins in a string, and the protein 53, which are groups of small proteins. The long low dose is below the activation level, and so the body does not recognise the harm until it is too late. I liken it to, in going back to the Middle Ages, if a wife wanted to get rid of a husband, she would put a few grains of arsenic in his food every day. and it built up to the point where then it was fatal. This is rather similar. You have the radiation coming in, it works through the cell, the damage starts, but the body is not activated. And 4 professors have written papers on this, and this is one of the problems. But yes, Wi-Fi in class, it should be fibre optic cabled right up to the computer, then you have no problem. But the problem with the girls is their ovaries contain all of their eggs, which will become babies. And this is one of the reasons why we are starting to getting, you know, as the girls grow up and have children, we are now getting the miscarriage rate and the genetic damage in the eggs.
Right, just, and then...
Thank you. I'd like to say that I sort of feel that all of us know that there is something to be fought here and to be opposed. But my feeling is, isn't it very important to actually name, if you like, if I want to put it in strong terms, isn't it necessary to name your enemy? If we consider that people are simply poorly informed, and thus if we do inform correctly, or we as a people will kind of put facts before such people, that they will pay attention because they're actually coming from a basis of, let's say, ignorance or ill-informed. So we think if we inform them, then make a change, we can make a change happen. If, in the case of vested interest, there's just vast amounts of money to be made in laying out 5G, for example, as it is, then we could, then argue, how could we best deter people from that, or what kind of power we have in a situation of multinational countries making millions who've already got all the Senate and all our governments in their pockets anyway. My question is there a possibility that it is all absolutely deliberate and that our demise, our ill health, our downfall is in fact what lies at the basis of everything that is not healthy to us as a human race? If there isn't a deliberate, what can I call it, intention behind it, that doesn't have to be informed because it knows fully well, that is not just motivated by money but by power, and that it is part of the whole programme to, let's say, reduce the human population or to reduce us to a level that we can't in fact fight for ourselves anymore.
A very good question, thank you. I'm just looking at some of my notes here. Some countries are actually taking action against the transmitters. I will come to you, I promise. I can only stay about another 20 minutes. So that's, yeah. I've just got a couple of notes here to sort of a bit of good news. Taiwan has just removed 1,700 towers from a heavily populated area due to miscarriages, cancers, neurological damage, depression, suicide. A 10-year study from Brazil, which they attributed 7,000 deaths to cell phone towers, ordinary cell phone towers, was repeated, and they had the same results in the US, Austria, Germany, Israel. Countries are actually doing something about it, because you can only kill a certain amount of people before people start fighting back. And these countries are fighting back. When we have a minister, as I read out, just 6 months ago, and said there is absolutely no harm whatsoever, therefore everything going up is deemed safe, what we've got to do is we've got to get to whoever is telling the minister what to say. Is it deliberate? I don't know. I really don't know. And I won't make up an answer. I do know that when you travel the world as I do, and I've zigzagged all the way to Australia and back twice, the densest parts of any country have the most transmitters, and they suffer the most cancers, the most miscarriages, the most suicides. It's always the most densest parts of the countries. Whether that is deliberate or because they are heavy users and they make much money, I don't know.
Hi, thanks Barry, thanks John. I've been teaching children for the last 25 years or so electronics, and one of the things that I wanted to ask about, or talk about, was micro miniature computers that are used for educational purposes. For example, you can now buy on eBay, you can buy a miniature computer that's this big, with Wi-Fi, soon to be 5G, for £1.87. And that's got its own computer built on board and its own Wi-Fi transmitter. It'll probably have 5G on it. So this means that there'll be millions of little transmitters all over the place. I also do hydrogen conversions for vehicles, and so I'm talking about Internet of Things. And with vehicles, for example, the other day I was asked if I would design a system that would transmit, as a fleet of buses, that as they are driving along, it would transmit how much fuel it was using minute by minute in terms of its hydrogen, so that back at the office they could take all the statistics. And I said no. I said that when you drive in, you can plug a USB in it and it'll download the day's worth, sure. But I'm just giving these as examples as to the problem is a lot bigger than we might think it is. And so, for example, you've got things like a Raspberry Pi. Some people heard of that? Educations for children, or an Arduino. Those in themselves are okay, but quite often you have Wi-Fi built in, that is soon to be 5G. So one of the questions that I was going to ask you, Barry, was another one. So that's Internet of Things, but also military application of the 5G in civilian populations. Am I right in saying that these are for microwave radar for the identification of where people are? I've heard of this, so that's a possibility. And just one thing, last thing, don't forget that you're an interdimensional spiritual being with infinite capability. I suggest you ask the universal consciousness for infinite protection.
There was a very interesting study published in the Lancet, which is the paper for GPs, and they subjected children to just 2 minutes of ordinary microwave radiation. 2 minutes. And at the end of 2 minutes, the children were given an EEG, and they found that after just 2 minutes of ordinary cell phone radiation, after 2 minutes, their brain showed entrainment. In other words, their brainwaves were not acting as they should, and Then the experiment was carried on, and they found that it took 2 hours before the brain was normal. And this was published in the Lancet. So just 2 minutes of exposure for the teacher, for 2 minutes of exposure to Wi-Fi or anything, the children will not have a normal brain for 2 hours. Now, they didn't carry the experiment on because ethically you can't, not with children. But I suspect it's not a linear scale where 3 minutes would be 3 hours and 4 minutes would be 4 hours. But if you think of a child in school now, they go into the playground, zonk. They're usually ringing up or talking to somebody with their cell phones. I doubt if they keep their call just to 2 minutes, but even if they did, if they kept their call or communication just to 2 minutes, it means that when they go in from playtime, for the next 2 hours until the next break, their brains will not be functioning normally. And then you get the repeat at lunchtime, and so on. And so what we have got now is a situation, and anyone can prove this if they want to. We have got now a situation where you will never ever have a child's brain settled down to its normal base level. And that's very scary. That is very scary. And it is compounded because their skulls are thinner. They don't have the same density of bone. Their skulls are thinner. They are more moist. Their brains are still developing. So what you are doing is you are knocking the waveforms of the brain for 2 hours after just 2 minutes use. I do know, and if you work it out mathematically, that if you just think of for the physicists here, I'm talking about entropy, second law of thermodynamics. If you think about it, the output of the brain is about 10 watts. Well, not about, it is 10 watts. The output of the brain is 10 watts. Think of a 100-watt light bulb. 10 watts is coming out of the brain. It is usually passed through as a form of heat because the brain cannot expand. The brain is in a skull and cannot expand, and if it does, you are in trouble. So the output of the brain is 10 watts. You can have a cell phone, and I wouldn't believe what you read in the book, because a lot of them actually put out a bit more. A cell phone can be 2 watts. Now, some of them are 2 watts, and I can assure you I've seen the testing. I'm saying they can be 2 watts, but if you want to go with 1 watt, you can. Let's just go with 2 watts, which is the ones that I've got the data for. A cell phone can be 2 watts. Now, you have 10 watts coming out, 2 watts going in. In 5 seconds, you have now matched what the brain is putting out, you are putting in. After 5 seconds, you have now 10 watts plus going in. If the gentleman is saying it's 1 watt, then it's 20 seconds. Doesn't matter. So you have 10 watts going in and 10 watts trying to come out. You are now changing the entropy of the brain. 10 seconds, or 5 seconds. 10 seconds if it's a 1 watt output. So you have 10 watts going in, 10 watts trying to come out. You now change the entropy of the brain, and the brain will start warming up. Any neurologists here I'd like to know the effect on the brain when it warms up, but expansion has to be one of the things, and the chemical processes must change. So it's as scary as that. And if the gentleman is saying it's 1 watt, then all right, it's 20 seconds. But there are children who will sit and hold a phone up for minutes and minutes and minutes. And if they're in love and they're teenagers talking to somebody, you are changing the entropy of the brain. And that has been documented, it has been proven. I'm sorry, sir, I read the scientific papers, and it has shown that there is a degradation in the cellular processes in the brain, in the actual thickness of the grey and the white matter.
Louise, yeah, sorry.
We're hearing that artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, transhumanistic agenda, including a possible mesh in the brain, relies on 5G. What do you think on this? What is your understanding? I'd like to also say to people, recommend a presentation by a lady, Japanese lady, called Lin Pu, that's on 5G, surveillance, AI, and also Jason Leosatis from Outside the Box will be interviewing her as well tomorrow evening.
I'm sorry, what was the question? The Internet of Things. Well, it is eventually, it will all be meshed into one mesh. The plan, as I have it, is that everywhere would just be one big microwave mesh. It's as simple as that, really. Yes.
You said that 24 gigs is the frequency that you use. It will not be used in topnets.
It definitely won't be used in topnets because we're not going to let anything be used here.
It won't be used in any small town because it's not financially viable.
I'm just going to answer that. On the industrial estate down here, a friend of mine went to a skip and came up with some very unusual looking items. I thought, oh, that looks like a microwave connection. So I looked up the numbers on the internet, they're 24 gigahertz. And these are apparently used for transmission lines from one building to another building and have been used for some kind of that's on an industrial estate.
Perhaps you should do your own conference here. I could organise it for you. I've got a shop around the corner. Come and see me.
Okay, 2 last questions as a chat.
Hello there. You've made a lot of reference to military use. Have you had any experience with people who identify as targeted individuals? And do you believe that there's something in what they say?
Are there targeted individuals? Without a doubt. It's been authorised by the CIA, the American government. There is a book, a captain, he's a captain in the Canadian intelligence, worked with the CIA, wrote a book, Hidden Dangers. I'm trying to think of his name. I showed you.
Silent Wars.
Sorry?
Silent weapons, silent wars.
Yeah. And he has listed all of the people used in experiments. But yes, it has been done. It certainly has been done. The problem I have is when people ring me up and say, I think I'm being targeted, and this is a brilliant question actually. People ring me up and say, I think I'm being targeted by microwaves for experiments. But they're ringing me on a cell phone. And a cell phone can cause the same symptoms. Now, it will surprise people here when I say that it is possible using microwaves to beam a microwave at you and to have you hear a physical sound in your ear.
Voice discovered.
And they can make you hear voice sounds, and it is used by department stores, particularly in the United States, and it was originally designed to prevent shoplifters. If they thought somebody was shoplifting, you can beam a microwave to the person's head. It interacts with the cochlea, the electrical processes in the ear, and you physically hear a voice or a sound. And they would say, put that back, we're watching you. And you would sort of look around. But it didn't take a person with more than 2 brain cells to think, well, hang on, if we can send a message saying, put that back, we can also send a subliminal message saying, buy it, or your wife would really love that big diamond, or something like that. And the department stores not only did this, but made a massive profit doing this, until it came out, and the department store was taken to court. And I have the court action and all the legal numbers, but the department store was found not guilty because they couldn't determine that the person was harmed. And the department store was found not guilty, and then it spread like wildfire, and it's even used in fast food restaurants. But it is possible to send a message via microwave frequencies to your ear and to make you can believe what you're hearing. It is used in the military. It is used in the military to brainwash people. I won't go into the processes, but I will say that in the military, the ordinary person can be broken down and brainwashed in 30 hours. I could do it. I could brainwash and program a person in 30 hours. But yes, it can happen, but generally it is not people being targeted. Generally it is either incidental stuff or you could be harming yourself from your own cell phone, which can have the same thing. But it is done and it is practiced, and it's being practiced to this day.
If we can beam microwaves directly into people's brains, why do we have any of this? Why do we need mobile phones?
Just going to take a couple of new questions, because just take a fresh question. Can we ask maybe both of these 3 at the same time?
Well, they're probably all different. But
yeah. We ask two in one, maybe.
Mine's quickie.
Go on then.
I'm just curious as to the link with nanotech and 5G. If there is any, do you know anything about that? The nanoparticulates that's spraying on us and putting in the food.
Geoengineering.
I really can't go into that now. Is it developed and possible? Yes. Is it being used? I don't know. But yes, they're using nanotechnology all over the place, mainly as miniature transmitters. But you can use it in people, on people. Yes. Right. So just take sort of.
It's a Harvard
shall we take a lady?
Experiment, Scopex, which is talking about that. Okay.
So as you just acknowledged that targeted individuals exist, but you feel that it's not very common. As a multi-generational MKUltra victim and targeted individual myself, I would be curious, why do you believe that it's a marginal population being targeted, and why do you believe that they are being targeted? And if anyone's interested, I'll just leave this posted to the wall. You can visit my whistleblower testimony.
Thank you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I remember the gentleman's name. There's a captain in the Canadian Secret Service Electronic Division, Jerry Flynn, his name. And his book is Hidden Dangers. He's in Canada. You can't walk into the shops and buy it. You have to look him up on Google or somewhere and go to him direct. I don't believe it is being marginalised. I think it is harder to detect because people are doing themselves a lot of harm by holding cell phones up. And then it is difficult to distinguish because it's the same microwaves. I don't believe it's being marginalised, but I think it is certainly more difficult to detect because you've got to try and separate cell phone and all the other ambient microwave from those being targeted. Why is it being done? There is a community who believe that, and this is the basis behind HAARP, H-A-A-R-P, the big microwave transmitter in Alaska. There are in fact 16 HAARPs around the planet. They can, using geometry, send microwaves from where they are to any part of the world. Around 30 years ago, it was proven that you can use HAARP for biological warfare, where dormant bacterium can be activated by a particular microwave frequency. They were using that. It is possible to cause mood changes by any country, and it has been done by the women in Greenham Common. I've got the document. It was done to the Catholic in Northern Ireland. So microwaves are an up-and-coming stealth weapon, and I will finish with you. I promise I'll finish with you. And there are countries, when you talk to people around the world, who believe that any future conflict will not involve sending hundreds and thousands of tanks and aeroplanes and bombs. It can be done with microwaves and microwave warfare, whereby you can block the power to countries and you can microwave the people. And it has been, in fact, it was a nun who wrote the book on the HAARP. It is possible to change the health of a nation and its crops and its animals by beaming certain frequencies, which is why they are testing frequencies on people, on animals and everywhere. That is going on, and it was authorised as little ago as the 90s by Ronald Reagan. So it is still going on. We'll take that last question from the first one.
It's a question for both yourself and John. Is it possible to upload the relevant documents that you've been citing onto 5gawareness.com? Yeah. Great. The question, tomorrow in the High Court, is Dr. Hatton Horton is taking a case against MI5 and SIS, the Swiss intelligence service, because she has been targeted in video.
Dr. Catherine Horton?
Yeah. I'm familiar with it. There are a couple of cases actually going to the High Court. I do know that. Sorry, what was the first question?
I'll upload the documents.
Oh, yeah. When John came to my house last week, I gave him a USB stick with virtually all of these documents on, and
I've copied them the day after the election because I've been so busy.
And you can download them. I mean, can I just say to the people here, even the gentleman that I admire that is actually standing up against me, I quite like that. Please, any of you, I work for free. I will turn up and represent any of you at any meeting. It doesn't matter if it's with one person or a committee. I will come and represent you free of charge. But if you want documents, I'm in your phone book. You've only got to look up my number, ring me and say, can I pop out, Barry? I want a copy of this, a copy of this, and a copy of this. And I'll say, yes, can you get here between here and here? I'm only the other side of Newton Abbot. Come out and you can photograph all the documents you want, and you can have your own set. And I really have to get back to my wife.
We're going to applause for Barry.